We're happy you've joined us for the study and discussions on the Emerald Tablets by Billy Carson and other authors. Parisha, an ancient text interpreter and tablet reader, will be hosting this weekly event. She will be joined by associate speakers from the LCFHD each session, and lines will be open for discussions. So join us on Mondays at 5:30 Pacific Mountain Time as we complete the book, and it will be on our YouTube channel, LCFHD, and check out our blog at emeraldtabletstudies.com. We will schedule to have anyone that has further studies to join us on the session and share your knowledge. Now here is our host, Parisha.
All right, greetings and welcome to Unveiling the Mysteries, and we want to discuss tonight again the Emerald Tablets. So last week, many of you had things, and you were raising your hands at the last minute that had things you wanted to share. So we're going to still kind of hang around here in chapter, what is this, chapter 3. So we're going to let people share some of the particular thoughts they had on the material. One of the things I want you to go to and look at is on page 39 in your book. And about halfway down in the book, it says, if man is not born again of water and of spirit. Okay. And it goes on to explain that to enable the real meaning of the above quote to be reached, it is also necessary to pay attention to the significance of the word water, which is not used here in its usual sense. The knowledge of physics was imperfect in ancient times, as many believed that the earth had risen out of the water. Therefore, water in its exclusive, primitive, generating substance is taught in the Old Testament book of Genesis. Then it goes on to talk about the book of Genesis. What I want to do in actually sharing that with you is to actually say that here, again, I don't completely, as a tablet reader, how we and the elders that I work with have interpreted this. We're not actually talking about water as Billy is assuming here. It doesn't really relate to the Great Deluge or how the world actually went through reset with the Great Flood. Okay, your body is 70% water. My body, all physical bodies, human bodies, are 70% water. Okay, we live in an atmosphere that we call air, and we think that it's open and empty. It is not. It's as the water is in the fishbowl to the fish. It is filled with what is considered the primal waters. The negative ions in our field determines what spiritual energy can actually become visible. It depends on the negative ions, and therefore spirits of other dimensions and other probabilities can actually present themselves. Now, we are supported in knowing that by physics, and especially quantum physics now. So when we're talking about here, it's actually saying that of water, okay, is spirit. It's one of the same. So when we're looking at this, and the interpretation that I've been involved with is that we're really talking about the physical body, and and then we had some people, I think it was Steve Jones, that wanted to share something you had looked up that you felt had more enlightening news on it. So what?
Great. So I was looking at what Nassim Harriman had to say about the importance of water, and he actually proposes that water is more important to human consciousness than the brain. Now that is interesting, because I think I would always thought you needed the brain, not so much water. But he points out that a lot of people lose big parts of their brain, and they're able to function with very little detriment to them. They're able to get that back without losing actual physical parts of their brain. But if they take the water away, the person will die immediately. And also with the DNA is about 75% water, and 75% of DNA is water molecules. So if you take that apart, it just falls apart as well. He talks about the fact that the spirit that spirit, the subtle energies of spirit and communication travel with the amount of water that you have. Water is the conductor for that, the communication between our bodies and the holographic field around us, the greatest factor in that communication is having water in your body, and that's what communicates between the field and our bodies itself. I also, and I'll send these links out, there's a Dr. Spangler who had an experiment, and he has an experiment, you can watch it on YouTube, and he has a car key fob, and he unlocks, he walks back from the car until the key fob doesn't work. And then he walks back even further. And then he puts it to his head, and then it unlocks the car, because the water actually helps project frequency. So it's not just, it's the water in your head. He does it with a bottle of water as well, but that just shows how it actually will project the frequency. It amplifies it, it will actually store it and broadcast it. And Dr. Emoto shows how, in his studies, it shows how you can actually program water with certain vibrations, and it will actually store it inside, and when it creates crystals, they will be different depending on how you program that water. So that's some interesting things I found.
Okay, that was very interesting. Thank you for sharing. And definitely, though the brain is floating in water, that's not part of the 70% that your cellular mass makes up. So we are definitely a water being, and that without that, and in order to enhance your intuition, you have to stay hydrated, you know, making sure that if you are actually eliminating the water replenishing capacity, it would be good to have a pen that you actually can retain some water level for residents and actually. So with what we're saying here in the tablets and how actually have our author interpreting that, he goes very to scripture and everything, but there is a far-reaching definition here on that. And that would be that when we speak of, we are speaking of water. And in almost all tablets, it will reference the likeness of spirit to water. And it be very true, because if we have something that is not of three-dimensional physical physics, it needs negative ions and that moisture or that humidity or however we want. In the mist, they can become very physically visual. With you cannot see them. So it's good to hear what you had to say. And Harriman's doing work out there. I'm hoping to actually catch him in May when I go out to college. Then we go over to page 41, where it says in Matthew 3, verse 11, that John Baptist says, I baptize you with, he shall baptize you with fire. Even the very understanding and how the different religions use water for baptizing or in some way or form consummating something person's made. All of that is pertinent to the fact that the water, the Holy Spirit, is of the water. And in some do ceremony over the water and call it holy water. The indigenous family of which I've been raised, and my roots, we always, water always present in every ceremony, and the presence of that water did speak spirit. So definitely there's other particular views to look at. No, I'm going to look at that board. Trying to tell me I need to look into the camera, and I'm saying, no, I'm looking at you. So just tolerate that I'm not looking at you. Okay. All right. Some other people, I think, Joyce, there were other people who had your hand up, and why can I not see every screen?
You have to have your video on.
I don't know. She
wanted
to see. You're not on the screen.
See how it's Joyce's iPhone.
Okay, you're by phone.
To turn their videos
so they
on.
can't. by phone. Somebody's calling in, you can't see them by phone.
You know what to do to make it?
Okay, we're having a little bit of a tech. Robbie, do you have something you wanted to
Yeah.
share?
I just wanted to add something. My
Okay, I
own.
don't see, yeah, I see
Yeah.
Robbie. Okay, I see you up there.
I need to be unmuted.
You're on mute.
All
All
right.
right. I just had something
to hear quickly. One of the statements that
was made in
uh,
Matthew chapter 11 that Jesus said,
he
"He
hath
hath
ears.
hear, let him he that hath ears to hear, let him hear." Well, Toth also mentions in the Emerald Tablets that only certain people will be able to understand the tablets. And one of the things when you're speaking about water is we have to, because we're 70% water, in order for us to understand that level of consciousness, we have to maintain our level of hydration. So we have to drink a lot of water. We have to maintain a really good weight, meaning no triglycerides in our system, and stay hydrated all the time so we can, it's almost like being buoyant enough to be up there to catch the drift of what's going on. So that's what I wanted to share.
Okay, and there were some points there, because most our spiritual communities, we constantly have the debate between vegetarians and meat eaters. Those who eat meat say that they still are conscious, while the vegetarians say you gain enlightenment while you're eating meat. So we still have a lot of that going on. My particular position on that is bless whatever you're putting in and accept that you would only put into the body what it is that you nurture and blessing on. So when we move on, Joyce, are you ready now?
I'm ready. I'm
Okay.
on my phone, so I
Okay.
know that I'm there too.
Well, you could see me, but I don't see you.
Look in your phone.
So I'll talk. Very good. The topic of reincarnation really intrigued me because almost 80 years old, and it was about the age of 20. I actually first heard about reincarnation, and here I was in nursing training. Had been a churchgoer for my lifetime, and never. I heard about reincarnation was one of my friends had an elderly aunt who, this is now 60 years ago, and this elderly aunt would have been in her 80s, very, very interested in reincarnation. So it was through a neighbor that I was introduced to reincarnation, which just fascinates me. So looked up information. Certainly in the Bible, there's all kinds of reincarnation. But as Billy Carson points, and this is what he surmised, and it seems pretty logical, the church to control the people. And they somehow felt that if about
They're
reincarnation,
saying they can't hear you. All of that was wasted.
I can start over again. Repeat what I said that couldn't be heard. So my introduction to
Keep it in front of your mouth. Yeah.
okay, was at about the age of 20, and just to have the time span, that's, and I was introduced to this totally unknown through an elderly aunt of my neighbor, and the elderly aunt was about 80. So this is way back, and this lady was just fascinated with reincarnation, believed in it, and taught us a whole lot of things. So I was just fascinated that goer for all those years and had never heard of this topic reincarnation. Now, as we're running into this so clearly in the Emerald Tablets, this was a topic I wanted to look up more about. And certainly all the different religions, the Bhagavad Gita was the one that I definitely got a quote here. It says, just as the self advances through childhood, youth, and old age, in its physical body, so it advances to another body after death. So that's about as clear a statement of reincarnation as you could find. And then, as we've noticed in the Emerald Tablets that we read last week, there's numerous quotations, numerous parts of the Bible that refer directly to reincarnation. So Billy Carson makes the comment in his part of this book is that he has come to the conclusion that the church did not want to lose control of the people. And they felt that they would lose control if people thought they had another chance and could come back again. So then it wouldn't really matter what they did. It wouldn't really matter if they went to church. And the church wanted, of course, to control the people. So that seems like a logical conclusion to come to, in my mind. And this topic is definitely one that still today, I recently, a pastor at the location I was working made a mention that he really didn't believe in reincarnation. So there's a lot of people out there that still are dubious that this even exists as a concept.
Okay, thank you. Obviously, that was a good run. You could see yourself now on the screen if you will.
Okay.
Okay, let's be clear with those who are calling in and are on your computers. I'm sitting in a room with several people, so there are people who are with me. So when you see me looking at people or looking away from the camera, I'm looking at those talking in the room, as well as the people who are trying to manage the technical end of our broadcast. So when I'm looking off like I'm looking right now, I'm looking at you on a big screen that they have put in the room so that I can see you all. And I prefer to be looking at you and seeing you all, okay? So I hope my technicians can finally get you on the screen and let me see. I see Mickey's name up there. I see Anole, but I don't see you. I do see Tom. Hey, Tom Stevens. I see Elway. And I see Larry. Now I'm seeing, I don't know who that is. Anyway, more pictures are starting to come up. That makes me feel good. Okay. All right. Then when we move on, were there any other people from last week that didn't get to share what they had hoped to be sharing? Okay.
Elway.
What is she saying?
Elway wanted to share.
Elway?
Yes, it was a quick note on that cerebral spinal fluid and how interesting it is that we know things like we have 4 chambers in the heart, but this shows us we also have 4 chambers in the brain, and those 4 chambers are where that cerebral spinal fluid circulates around from, and also down our spinal cord. So there's a lot of those sort of Egyptian images and things that show a pattern. And as we look more at biology and the shapes of our own internal structures and our main internal structures, we see those echoed in many of the ancient people's images, and particularly in the ancient Egyptian work. So as a person who loves biology, and I've done that as my major, it's really exciting now to see the patterns that are within our physical structure echoed. My 2 favorites were biology and ancient history. And I keep getting these wow moments where I'm seeing the 2 come together, the ancient history images and the images of our internal. The other thing I'd just like to add is when we talk about water and that cerebral spinal fluid is helping us to be buoyant, it protects, it creates what's called homeostasis, that balance of salts, but the fluid itself is salty. And so it contains sodium, it contains chloride, and again, it's echoing back to the ocean. So it's fluid, but it's also linking us with the ocean. And as you mentioned, those negative ions. So quite a lot of the salt component of the cerebral spinal fluid is the same as that we find in the ocean, and the same negative ions that then create what you've been talking about, that water then becomes more than water, becomes spirit. So I thought that was interesting.
I appreciate that, and thank you very much. That is interesting. the very fact that our bodies have been engineered by the Anunnaki, by whoever we're calling the gods, okay, and how perfect that is. I spent my whole life just in awe of just how wonderful and beautiful and perfect that is. So just everything that functions is so genius in itself that when we start seeing the new sciences that are actually opening up greater doors of awareness of what we are and who we are. And so at this point, not only have we learned that it isn't the brain, not this thing that sits up here on top of our head, but it's actually the neurons of the heart, and that the heart has more neurons than the brain. So knowing that we put a lot of emphasis on what we're thinking and what our brain is doing, we have lost the concept that the real intelligence that we work from is what the ancients have spoken of as the seat of the soul, which would be your heart. And that what we can prove in technology now is how when we start the thinking process, we can immediately move from the heart and the light goes up to the top of the head and actually shoots out and creates like an auric field around our head and all the way up to the heart center. So we would have a circle that encompasses our body right to our heart and to just above the top of our head. And that's all conceivably physical because we can do it with computers now. Okay, and that shows that the heart sends the message to the brain, and from there the brain broadcasts it and assimilates it through the body. So when we start looking at that, and then we understand the whole information we've now been given and shared about the water, then we know where we're at and pretty much how we need, as Robbie shared, we need to stay hydrated. Last week I'd said I'd like to actually get this week to dealing with some of the actual particular parts that Toth has shared here. I like in the beginning how starting out in the first tablet, that he actually explains his own journey into realization. Okay, now while we're talking about a 36,000 lifetimes, okay, a lifetime of 36,000 years, we're also looking at the fact that each one of us today in our pursuit of enlightenment, okay, and you begin to realize there's a quickening that's happening, okay, and that quickening is because the new sciences are validating everything that you and I used to only be able to discuss as esoteric or occult, and that now the sciences has to catch up. And as you watch how the sciences are starting their particular part of revealing the truth on these matters, you're seeing that the churches are changing. So this field that's around us is resetting itself, because we're in the process of now actually developing a new layer to the brain, okay, and with that evolve the greater consciousness of which we become aware. And only then did we actually realize that the green emerald tablets would actually be able to be understood, that people today could actually read them and get more out of them. Now, there are a lot of controversial particulars on these tablets. There are people who have disclaimed them. We have one particular member of our group who studies with somebody who feels that everything we're reading about on the Anunnaki as well as the emerald tablets are incorrect, and has quite a few issues on what she considers misinforming us of the halls of Amenti. I'm not saying yay, nay, no, yes to any of that. I've asked you all to share what it is that you feel you've read and what you know, because this whole thing that we're doing is to explore. So there's no need to make anybody right or wrong. We just need to know what are all the different perspectives of it. And last week we had one of our people who were on actually shared a lot of what the particular Kabbalah perspectives on this is. So there are many voices talking. And at this point, we don't want to shut any of them up. We want to hear everybody and hear the particular view of what people are seeing so that we can move on and actually determine for ourselves where we can settle our own curiosities and trust. Okay, so when we come to Thoth's tablet, the first tablet, it actually explains how many years in all of the particular phases that he went through to actually obtain what he obtained in the end. And he speaks of himself as a son of man, whereas with the Anunnaki and those who we are calling the particular intelligence of the aliens, again, my people, we call them the ancients, okay, that we're actually looking at the fact that he doesn't consider himself one of them, that he actually identifies himself with man, with humankind, and that in his humankind he acquires the levels of what he is speaking here in the tablets. And at this point, I felt when I first heard this, and definitely Billy Carson's version of this, I felt it so unique and really probably effective, that how he's presenting it is purely looking through the Old Testament, which would be more of Jewish history and Judaism than it would what I consider Christianity. And then it goes into actually reciting some of the scriptures, which we are now calling New Testament, which would be given credit to Jesus the Christ for that, okay? However we're doing that, I feel if we can actually reach people that have been totally blanked out on this, that never have ever even considered that there was a different perspective on the heaven and hell concept and the punishing God. If we could just get people to be comfortable enough listening to it in the particular manner of how it's being presented. I feel no matter if you agree or disagree with Billy Carson, that's just not the situation for me. I feel if this helps anybody who has actually been raised in Christianity, whose cellular memory is based in Christianity, then we can see a bigger picture. And when that begins to open up, that's exactly what we're achieving here. We want to open minds to a greater perspective or a greater thought or even a greater experience. Okay, and for some of us, and I would probably suggest that most of us on the call and on the Zoom program with us too, we have studied very much farther, even in depth than this. So I've had one person tell me that Billy Carson's stuff is for kindergartens because that's how much they've read and they know. And I'm happy to hear that. It's like, great, then please speak up, share, put some stuff in. As we're going through it, I definitely will bring it into clarity of my own experience of reading these tablets, and not on the paper or due to Dr. What is his name, Rial?
Doriel.
Royal. I have never heard this interpretation until now. So this was brought to my attention some months back, and it's like I was very closed-minded to it. And then after talking to a number of elders and people, it's like, well, then how do you actually get the chance to give a different reflection if you're not going to be open to this? So that would be my reason for being involved with this. There are different reflections that I have on the material. I shared one of those when we talked about the water and how the particular, I think when you feel that know, or not feel, but know that Christianity bases a lot on baptism and that they use water as outside. You know, it has to be something we do outside that we want to acknowledge the inside of something, right? And that's not where I go with this. The water is us. It is inside us. It is spirit. And without it, as Steve covered in his sharing of the research he did, we could not exist. When you take everything out, when you take all the water out of the physical body that you have, you would have nothing bigger than a little mustard seed. So when you look at the massiveness of your body, you have to realize that most of that is water and a lot of other kind of ingredients. Okay, so that we are not mass, we are not solid. And that's where we begin with actually exploring in many of your teachings where they're telling you you're not the body. Well, if you've known nothing else, if you've never explored yourself outside the body, then there's a whole field of experience you're going to have to open yourself to actually get further into understanding what we're trying to discuss here. Okay, if the body is everything to you, it tells you it hurts, it tells you it's tired, it tells you what it's hungry, it tells you all these things. So you are in body mind. Okay, and that means the body rules everything. It's where you draw your margins of how far you'll go, when will you stop, so forth and on, or even how and what can you do. Yet we know that people actually do some pretty extraordinary things, and physics is proving that. There are groups I'm working with where people are pronounced dead, and the healers can actually bring them back. So are we raising the dead? Yes. Are we actually doing terrific and very, very advanced things? Yes. And so looking at these tablets and thinking, well, how far back do we go? We are eternal. It isn't about going back. It's the circle that says it's all right now, future and past. And so be open to these things. And as I read the particular tablets themselves, as given here, I'm going to ask you to please come forward and give your thoughts on what we just read. What do you think that means? Where are you at with that? And I trust that just as I know each one of you have a different fingerprint, none of us the same, that you'll have a perspective on it that none of the rest of us will. And if we put all those pieces together, we will surely come out with far more than Billy Carson gave us in this book. And that would be our very purpose for doing this, okay? So let's go over to, let's see, where was we at? There's on 41, some parts of his scriptures that I think that we ought to cover, and then I'm going to ask you for feedback. What are you thinking this is saying? Okay, at the bottom of page 40, it begins by saying, and Thoth said, great were my people in the ancient days, great beyond the conception of the little people now around me, knowing the wisdom of old, seeking far within the hearts of infinity, knowledge that belonged to earth's youth. Wise were we with the wisdom of the children of light who dwelt amongst us. Strong were we with the power drawn from the eternal fire. Anybody have any thoughts on what that's saying? Anything that you could actually share with us from the Kabbalah, Melissa, would be good on that. Any thoughts on that? Nobody? Okay, for me, I think that when this is his beginnings, remember. I think that when he was as human and actually being aware that there was so much more going on around him, that here he actually is journaling exactly what he feels and sees. Because in the beginning, before we actually went through the other resets, and I'm not calling the various cataclysmic changes that the earth's gone through. To me, those are resets. They were determined and they were carried out according to our prophecy. Just as what's happening right now is accurate 100%, even to this new virus that we've just experienced, even to the fact that we'd all be put in our houses and asked not to leave. All of that's in the prophecies, to the letter, to the time, to the dot, okay? So when we're looking at this and Thoth is sharing this, it helps me go with him to see, we're talking about when he began, and he was in a place to where there were light beings and there were these very advanced consciousness all around. So he puts himself in a place pretty much like us, seeking all of the higher consciousness that we can learn through the science, the spiritual sciences and research, the records, actually material like this. We've opened up that field of discovery in the age of information. So when we look at that, I feel that it gives me encouragement to say, even a being that has mastered 36,000 years of life can actually have and show that it took a beginning, and that there are still light beings around us. There are still very advanced souls. There are still people that don't fit in the boxes that our societies say exist. Far, far beyond that have I had experiences that I'm not alone in that. Okay. So then we come to the second 41 where Thoth says, and of all these, greatest among the children of men was my father, Thoth, keeping of the great temple linked between the children of light. So we're talking then about he admitting that as he comes into this, there is this being that is elevated in consciousness and knowledge that actually is the direct link to what he is considering the children of light. So it pretty much puts us right in the midst of that, don't you think? I mean, I see myself and all of who I study with as right there. We know that the children of light are with us, and we know that they do assist us, and that we don't necessarily physically see them, but that we are starting to see more of them because more people are being awakened to the reality. Okay, here Billy explains that Tutmi is actually the Sumerian god Enki. The Sumerian god Enki is an Anunnaki, is one of the Anunnaki brothers that actually brought about our particular evolutionary process and cycles. If you haven't read it yet, I have suggested it to people coming in from a whole new direction on this. Please check out Janet Stitchen's book called the Anunnaki Chronicles. Anunnaki Chronicles? Yeah. Okay, the Anunnaki Chronicles. And actually see how Janet and her grandfather, Zechariah, covers the planetary evolution of which we as humans have gone through. So there's all these connections that are coming, I think are very, very real to helping you understand what you are, what you can do, and how reaching it is to be privileged to actually work with humanity, human. Okay, children of light who dwelt within the temple and the races of men who inhabited the 10 islands. In our tablets, it actually, the way we interpreted seeing these tablets is talking about the continents, which here is referenced as islands or interpreted as islands. They were large land masses. Okay, he says mouthpiece after the three of the dweller of Unknown. Now, mouthpiece, I've been looking, I'm gonna probably go back and look at that again because that I can't relate to anything in our interpretation of that would actually work with that. For here he's saying mouthpiece after the three of the dweller of Unveiled, speaking to the kings. So it gets kind of out there. Anybody have anything you'd like to add or say to that? Geraldine, they say you raised your hand again.
Yes, it was that little moment before actually, where it's an interesting use of the word great beyond the conception of the little people. And as you mentioned with the work of Stitchen and the Anunnaki Chronicles, reading that now with the background knowledge, it seems quite direct that it's meaning the conception as in the birth of, and as we're shared through the Anunnaki Chronicles, that we have the very large people, which is different here from the little people that are around him, and the conception of. So he's saying before that hybridization event that involved the DNA from the beings that are part of the earth and the DNA from the Anunnaki to conceive and then bring forth these little people. So this information from the Emerald Tablets is very much in alignment with that message. And even when I say that, there's this feeling as well that I really don't know. There is so much more depth to it. And as as you've helped us see as well, this concept of time, it's more this recurrence of time, because from the Chronicles, it tells us that's something that's 3,600 years ago, or, you know, in those cycles, another 3,600, another 3,600. And yet our interpretation through tablets like this is to just blow that all away and be open to the perception that what we're looking at is events, and not trying to stick them on the linear timeline that history that we're taught in schools has really programmed our brain to do. So I'm noticing my own mind needing to go, timing, does that fit? And it's like the concept fits, drop the concept of linear time.
Okay, thank you. And we have Melissa, you do have something you want to add?
So the idea is that the priest kings, the Levites, were the first people to breed with the Anunnaki. And the Anunnaki were 12 to 15 feet tall. And so the little people basically is everybody else. And also during, as this was a protected priesthood, the breeding was between people. It's why kings only breed with other royalty, so that they keep the long life of the Anunnaki, who apparently, if we believe that they exist, their orbit was so large that they, 1 year to them was a little over 1,256 years, something like that. And so they were very long-lived. And so when they bred, that's where you get in the Old Testament and all of the lineages with Methuselah and David. They were much, those are literal years. They just lived a long time because they were bred with the Anunnaki. And so little people are basically the people who weren't given any of the teaching, who didn't breed and weren't in this sort of elite. And the mouthpiece is probably the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark of the Covenant was theoretically a communication piece where people spoke through it. And it was held in Jerusalem, which is why Jerusalem is still so important. And it's a voice that must be obeyed, because if it wasn't obeyed, there were consequences. And just as a fun thing, if you don't think this is true, one of the major names for God, for the holy, for the Elohim, is Hashem. And Shem in Sumerian and in Hebrew means missile, rocket. Anyway, that's it, unless you have a question for me.
No, but I appreciate you so much. So please stay alert and jump in whenever you can. That's great information. And it helps link. See, everything you're giving us helps another link. So please, people, don't hold back. If you have something you want to share, that's great. Okay. And there is a wealth of information, I know, if you've studied the Kabbalah, that can actually link us to this. And I appreciate the update on the Sumerian and the Atlantean thing. The Anunnaki were 12, 15 feet people. And you have ancient people, indigenous people all over this world who have prophecies to where they talk about the giants and the tall ones. Okay. In Australia, in fact, where we have Geraldine and a few of our other people on the line actually are calling in from there. The Australians actually have a history to where there were very tall black people, 12, 15 feet tall black people that originally lived there and actually seeded who are the children of today. Okay. And that there was a point where they decided that they would no longer actually reincarnate of themselves there. So they actually spawned this whole other group of what would be more human-like people, of which we have now that we see as the Aboriginal people of Australia. But when I was there and was taken into the outback and looked at some tablets and carvings and stone tablets that they have, okay, we are talking about basically the very same people. And actually the Anunnaki have actually have their footprint on the continent of Australia. Lots of teachings there. And the fact that the Australian people's history knows that they are of the water people. And they write a lot of their history by showing fish. as you do when you look at the Egyptian writings and everything. When Enki is present, he actually has a fish on him, or there's fish out circling around him. So all of these connections show how far reaching all of the particular beginning histories of our evolution began. And we're talking billions of years. Our tablets show us we're not talking a few thousand or a few million. Okay, we're talking billions of years. Okay, this is how much our Earth has been in process on us as part of her and evolution. So when you start to try to bring time into this, as Geraldine, your point was, we can't put it on a timeline that we comprehend. You know, how does your mind actually grasp a billion? A billion of what? Okay, and so we have to kind of doctor that so that when we start saying, this is what Jesus said, and we realize it's what Thoth was saying, and we're saying that Jesus is what, a couple of thousand years back, and we're saying, no, this being was 36,000 or more. You can't, you don't, there are no valid arguments that we can base and say one is and one is not. Right now, just be open and put the pieces together yourself is the best you can hope for. Okay, and that'll at least deliver you to the door that you will move through the quickest. Okay, I have here a note that says, Trina, you have your hand up. I don't see you yet. Where's Trina? Okay, I see you now, dressed in your pretty red something or other.
So when I read this little piece, Thoth is talking about his father, and Thoth was Enki. This is what they're saying, he's Enki. So Enki really was the one who came to Earth. Enki was the one who was the link, was the mouthpiece, the person who brought from the Anunnaki to the Earth, who talked to the people, the dwellers of the temple, and even the dwellers in the ships and the dwellers on the other planet. He was the one that was here, that was speaking everything that was coming from them to the people that were here. And as they started breeding with everyone here, he was bringing all that information. Then Thoth was his son. And so he was learning all of that from his father, Thoth. And so when I read this and it says, he's the link between the children of light, which I would say are the Anunnaki, who knew so much more, and they dwelt within the temple, within the confines of the area that they created for themselves, and the races of men who inhabited the earth, the 10 islands. So it could be the continents. And he was the mouthpiece. He was the one that spoke from these gods to the people. And he spoke to the kings, and they had to obey. So that's the way that I take this little piece, this little paragraph that's here.
And I think how Melissa tied that in as to how they breed and everything actually is even more confirmation of that. So yes, very much so. And so when we go on, what actually goes on through, and I won't read, I'm trying to look at time here. We do have a little bit more time. But as Thoth goes through and continues to talk to us, okay, and tells us some of the particular information he's passing forward, okay, he actually speaks of being here in the time when we go through the Great Deluge, when the earth gets flooded and does its little shift on its axis and things happen. I have done a great deal of research in the tablets of my people and the many other indigenous people's tablets. And the Anunnaki, or who we're calling the ancients, knew of the fact that in the heavens, in the universe around us, that there are certain cyclic situations that take place, and that at any one of them, or a particular selected one, we could actually have impact, and then it would actually have to be a restart. What we would consider evolution would restart itself. And at that point, wherever we are as far as human consciousness would be how we seed the next period of time that we move through. And that was one of the things that brought me to this, is because we are in that reset timeline, that cyclic time. We are in that 1200, 1300 year cycle, and we do have asteroids coming at us full force. Okay. And in that time, what our tablets show is that they determine that what you're calling the gods, what we call the ancients, determined that the leader, Enlil, at that time, had said that he did not like how very intelligent humanity had come, that the humans had begun to have independence, had outgrown the control of the slavery model that they had made of us, and that we were actually learning and evolving as intelligence can. And they were very concerned about that. All they wanted from us was brute force. We gave them so much more. We challenged them at how fast we could learn and adapt to what we were learning from them. And of course, Inky, and definitely his sister, was putting everything they could into our DNA as we kept generating. So right now, what I do know, call it conspiracy, whatever you need to go to with this, what is happening right now, the collection of actually asking everyone to go for their background, their ancestral track. They're trying to find the different lineages of which these particular gods did leave their DNA track into more of the present line of it. And you have your conspiracy people who believe that the families that control all of the money and have the greatest power on our planet is actually more of the direct lines of that. And I can only tell you in everything I've read, I can say that they confirm that, okay? So when we're looking at what we're doing now, okay, right within the next 2 to 3 days, we have the meteorite that is known by Hopi and many of the indigenous people's tablets I work with, and my own, that actually have said, this is the time that is determined whether the consciousness of the planet can hold its own. That we can actually take this and actually, by our own consciousness, make sure that that meteorite goes a little further out and doesn't have as much impact in the magnetics of our planet and our solar system. And what tickles me and excites me is that everything is showing that it's not going to be like that this time. Yeah, we are having earthquakes. Yeah, the actual lava of our planet is moving and actually beginning to rumble and do a whole lot of talk, which would be the effects of these meteorites coming closer to our magnetic field. Okay, but impact. Are they actually heading for impact? Well, the particular cycle they're on could very well let us have impact. What would that mean? I don't have to discuss with you all what that would mean. It would mean devastation for sure. But I also understand that with all of the communication and the mediums and the psychics and the whoever else you're calling that are actually having definite downloads and transmissions with these people, the people I know who are having all of the effects of that, all my own experience with that, is that we have a narrow margin of making it this time. And so I feel just us discussing this and looking at this from an enlightened willingness to just consider will actually help us make that decision and make this time a different loop time. Is there anyone that wants to have anything to add to that? Mary Smith?
Yeah. So something I'm okay, you know.
I turned it off.
Oh, you did. Okay. So the
Flood story, the great flood story, is something that is, I wanted to look and find out how many peoples is it only just in what we're understanding as the, in the Emerald tablets, the Sumerian tablets, and in the Christian Bible and in Judaism, is that the only place where it shows up. And it turns out that the great flood shows in about every culture around the world. In the Vedic scriptures, And they date like the earliest 3500 to 1700, which predates a lot of most of the written scripture. There's a character whose name is Manu, and you can pretty much replace Noah with Manu all the way from his God, his guardian coming to tell him that there is something coming, and make sure you've got duplicate, make sure you take care of your family, and the building of the ark, the description of the ark, and even all the way through that the ark lands and like sticks on a mountain and stays there as the water recedes. It's almost an exact duplication, and yet it's written thousands of years prior to what's written, captured in the Bible, as well as the Chinese in the writings that they call the Gunyu, the Maya writing. There's an accounting in the Ojibwe. There are accountings in other cultures in Meso or Middle America. So all the way around the world, there is a memory of the Great Flood, and very much the same type of story repeated all throughout the world.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. All right. So basically back on to page 43. Is there anybody else that has comment? Please put your hand up so I can see you. Okay, I can't see everybody. Obviously, you don't have them on.
Yeah.
But if you guys can, if you guys who are monitoring this can see it, please let me know when you see somebody raise their hand. All right. So then we go over to page 43. And Toth says here, purposes yet unborn in the womb of time. Long ages I dwell in the temple, learning ever and yet even more wisdom, until I too approach the light emitted from the great fire. So here he's sharing again his own evolutionary growth and showing that the fact is that even if you don't have the direct DNA of the gods, you still make it, okay? Taught me he, the path to Amenti, the underworld where the great king sits upon his throne of might. Deep I bowed in homage before the lords of life and the lords of death, receiving as my gift the key of life. Free was I of the halls of Amenti, bound not by death in the circle of life. So when we're actually looking at this, this is where we realize that Toth is saying there's a point where we can evolve to where you do not experience death as you do now. One of the other things that Billy makes very much aware in this book is that somewhere in the very, we would consider at least maybe the 100, better than maybe 100 million years now, that we actually had an alteration made, that we had actually developed because of what Toth is saying here, and the other tablets are saying, we had evolved as human, the ability to live these extended periods of life, and that the few could actually go into Amenti or choose not to. Amenti meaning to go into spirit and live in that realm of which my people call Galalati. So we actually know that there are those who move to that, those who don't move to that, okay? And here he's sharing again that there comes a place to where we in the state of just humanness that have evolved of itself, that we move forward. Last week I shared with you because I had friends over and we watched a movie on Gaia where they actually had a man, his name is Perry in North Carolina, that found out that he has the DNA of people who lived 136,000 years, okay? So all in all, his cellular memories would involve 136,000 years. That's how it is. And that actually is to encourage you to continue to work on yourself, inside yourself. Forget about this out here. Get in here. Okay, get in the heart, get in there and work with that. Go into you, because you have purpose to do there, okay? And then you find out what it is you're here to actually, how you can evolve yourself. to these greater heights. We have record now to where the oldest person has lived to be 140 years old. Not when all of the laws of insurance is telling you they're allowing for you to be 72, 75. And you can't even get insurance if you're 80 anymore. So we're living beyond the timelines that man has set for us, right? So we have to come back and realize, so as we start shooting for longer, okay, we definitely will need to be healthier to do that, okay? Then we go down to the bottom of 43. Far to the stars I journeyed until space and time became as naught. This is you. This is me. This is us doing meditation and getting out of the particular shell of thinking of us as a body. The more you're doing the greater meditations and actually experiencing the void, the nothingness, this is your key to illumination on this. And this is endorsed repeatedly in the number of tablets that I've read. That journey is ours, and it is through our heart. And it does take us outside the actual limits of time. And the more we can do of that, the longer we will be of health and well-being. Then, having drunk deep of the cup of wisdom, I looked into the hearts of men, and there found I greater mysteries and was glad. Okay, what he's saying here is that the human evolutionary cycles of which he returns from making his journeys, okay, and comes back to Earth, he sees how the children of Earth have now evolved and the consciousness has changed. And here he's saying when he sees that, he's pleased. He's very glad to see that human has developed even stronger and gone further than was first given the opportunity. There is a point to where Inky instilled free will into the human experiment and evolutionary track. Your scripture speaks of that God gave you free will. Okay, all scriptures speak of the free will. Well, what is your free will if you're still believing that you're harnessed and held back by threat of hell, fire, and whatever? You can't make your mistakes, pick it up, and go forward. When we talk about forgiveness, how do we actually really practice forgiveness? Okay, what you can do is you won't forget. Okay, it's in there. But you can determine to not let yourself be dragged down by it. That's as close as you're going to come to forgiveness. But to think that there's a point where you come to where it's no longer a painful thing to think about or a memory that's unpleasant, it's not going to happen. But it doesn't need to stop you. It's where you make the decisions and meet your crossroads and where you decide you do not let that control you anymore. That whatever that is and the whoever and the circumstances of that is something you can put aside and go forward into being the greater of who you are. So when we look at this, that he talks about, he's happy to see that, the greater mysteries, and was glad. For only in the search for truth could my soul be stilled and the flame within be quenched. Down through the ages I lived, seeing those around me taste of the cup of death and return again in the light of life. And here, Top has conquered the barriers of space and time on space-time as we know it today. He is a space traveler, journeying far to the stars through reincarnation or regeneration. He is ageless and immortal. That actually is a statement that gives us opportunity to consider that. And there are many groups. There are people who identify as Melchizedek groups and stuff that actually are exploring the depth of that. And again, what's possible? What's impossible? What's it all? Anybody have something else you would like to add to that? Can you see anybody raising their hand? I can't see everybody, not all of them are on.
Yes, Melissa, just one moment.
So nobody's up.
Melissa.
Melissa.
Melissa?
I would just point out that there's another Sumerian track, which is Ahura Mazda from the Zoroastrian faith, and his name is the Great Fire. So I have a feeling there's something connecting these two, but I don't personally know what it is. That's it.
Can you repeat that? What is it you're saying?
Ahura Mazda is the name of the Persian god in the Zoroastrian faith, but that translates into the Great Fire. And here Thoth is talking about the Great Fire, and the lesson, Zoroastrianism is probably the oldest religion outside of Africa there is. And it originated there, so that's whatever. But all of the Anunnaki bas-reliefs are of Ahura Mazda. So there seem to be one and the same, but the translations for that have been lost.
Yeah, well, they haven't been lost, but they definitely have been exclusively hidden. There are a lot of tablets that I've had privilege to look at that are considered lost, but they are actually in what is considered safekeeping by certain groups and peoples. And so that's definitely something interesting to look at and think. And I can tell you it resonates as good. So you come on to something good there. Okay. So before we end, let's go down to the bottom of 45. And Thoth said, "Dark beneath us lie the temple. Suddenly over it rose the waters. Vanished from earth until the time appointed was the great temple. First we fled toward the sun of the morning until beneath us lay the land of the children of Kim." So then the next where he picks up on the next readings is actually where he comes back after the deluge and the water, begins to recede, which is a great number of years. We're talking thousands of years here. Okay, we're not talking a couple of 100 years. Okay, and then he actually comes back and says that he comes and finds that there are humans here, that there are peoples here. And he says, "Raging they came with cudgels and spirits, lifted in anger, seeking of slay, and utterly destroy the sons of Atlantis. Then raised I my staff and directed a ray of vibration, striking them still in their tracks as fragments of stone of the mountain." And that would be not a thing that destroyed them, but a thing that actually caught them in time and held them still. And we do have, and there is actually such a weapon or such a gadget already here and actually is on our earth. They've found a way to create that. Okay. And so we can see that. Now, who are they and how are we saying that begun? So those are questions. Again, if you have any research on anything that expands on that, it would be real good for you to share that as well. We know that there are more things that actually come about as we see the next visitation of Thoth on the planet and actually what comes about in the evolutionary track of that. But what I want to say is in the mini tablets that's out there and that have been done, there are tablets that are older than what we're seeing here that actually talk of the gods coming to earth. There are indigenous peoples' tablets that actually speak of people coming in these particular chariots or ships that land in some big thing that they describe. And you see here on page 46, or is it 46? Yeah, where there's actually a drawing in ancient. I've seen drawings and hieroglyphics and ancient people's writings that have actually shown the whole replica of what a spaceship would look like today. Some so accurate, undeniably, what we are looking at is past. Okay, so basically, looking at all that, we have had the visitations come back. Right now, a lot of the tablets that I'm reading actually are dealing with what we're calling the resetting of the cycle of time. And that's where we're at right now, is looking at all the tremendous changes and shifts, in what recent history have we had such a reaction to where people were told, you know, under government rule to actually go home and not come out without permission. You have things that are starting to happen that will continue to happen. And one of the most basic truths that some are saying today is we will never be the same. And that is exactly true. All of the tablets that take us from this particular 2020 period of measure, our time, is actually saying that. But I don't want it to be a scary time. It's a time to where you and I have studied all our lives for this. So it's a time to see the rewards and the acknowledgement of, yes, it is here. Yes, it is happening. And to increase your part of it is to go deeper into your meditations, go deeper into you, and stop being so much of the world, but being more of you. That's what I would hope to see more of. And Melissa, you have something more you wanted to share? Melissa? I see.
Just about this verse. There are Canaanite legends about the Red Sea where it talks about these great chariots rising up out of the Red Sea and disappearing. And one of the things, forgive me for, I'm not quite sure the dates because I read the Chronicles back in the 80s and they're in a box in California, so I can't run to my reference shelf. But I believe that their planet, Nibiru, has a 5,126-year orbit, I think. And so there was a period of, as the ship is passing basically through our solar system, they could beam in and out. But once they passed that, they had to wait until they came around the orbit again. And so the gods would disappear. They'd come back, they'd disappear, but it has to do, I believe, with that orbit. That's it.
Okay. The tablets that we have, and my own experience, I can tell you they left some here. Okay. And as far as what are the new updates in the tablets, you have Inky still on planet Earth. So those are things I want to share as we continue to go through here. So I feel you're a gem to be on this with us, Melissa, so stay close. Okay. All right. Anybody else have something you'd like to share in closing? I feel I could talk to you for 8 hours about this book and never get tired. So I'm going to honor that we say 7 o'clock and come back. And next week, we'll actually be talking about the 4th chapter. So read ahead and see what you have that you could add. Look for things, you know, go on the internet, look up things and find out. I'm finding that Gaia is kind of limited to some of their stuff. So you don't want to omit YouTube. There are people who are going on YouTube that's not needing to be cleared through whatever the process it takes for them to get on Gaia. So there is tons of stuff on YouTube that you can look at for this period of time in the writings, okay? I love you very much. I'm very happy. It makes me feel good to see all your beautiful faces, especially all of you that are definitely very personal to me. I see you there, Mickey. I do see you. And I see Gabby. I see Margaret. I see all of you. Anoli, I see you well. This is good to see. I see Maria. I see you over there. Yeah. And I see you, Tom. Tom Stevens is over there. And Gary, I see you relaxed there. My King Tut himself, right? And I think I lost Larry. He was visible on the screen before. And you, Trina. So everyone, please have a very healthy and be well over the week that's coming. And I look forward to talking to you again next week. OCO.